Podmajake it on, what's the date today, Norrie?
Is it the 18th or the 19th?
It's the 18th, Friday the 18th of July.
Yeah.
As usual, Norrie, we're going to start with some of our viewers' comments. So is there anything that you've got in your mailbag which is repeatable live on the air at this time in the morning?
There's a few. Ayur Moore says, we're talking about the SNP before, and she says, if the SNP had any balls, they would do what Sinn Féin did in 1919 and get the hell out of Westminster. DJ Marty's on the same theme. He says, hi guys, is it no time our MPs in Westminster, or Westminster he calls it, were recalled back to Scotland? What a waste of our votes on sending our representatives there to be laughed at. I don't know about you, but I didn't vote for an MP to be in a foreign country's parliament to be taken for a joke. Time this issue was aired. Well, we've aired it.
Sadly, yep. Sadly,
so
that's
we can add to that, Gordon, is there, really?
Okay, what do we have next, Norrie, on that list of yours?
Kate Forbes has more sound bites than Alistair Campbell. We started speaking about tourism at the end of last week's show, but I think we're going to do that as a standalone thing, Gordon, because there's so much to it and so many players and aspects to it that it wouldn't do it justice in 10 minutes of a show. We'll have to do a one show on it and then get on with it.
Yeah, we'll maybe do a deep dive into that later.
Yeah. She has more sound bites than Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair put together, and her latest spurting is all that is. She is married to a Tory, and I'm beginning to think that the Broadchurch has swallowed her whole, Rachel. And then there's another one about, unfortunately, tourism. We're talking about that at the end. It brings in money, but who sold the houses to property developers in the first place? Well, landowners did, farmers. And why did they sell it to these developers? Because that's the only person they can sell it to. The market's been squeezed. The European Union has deprived them of subsidies and grants to leave their farm. They could leave it fallow for a whole year and still get paid. That was gone. So with that revenue stream not coming in, they have to make ends meet like anyone else. And who comes in but these vultures from the free market and build houses that nobody wants and nobody can afford?
Well, we can dive more into that a little bit later on today's programme. Is there anything else unusual in the postbag this morning?
Not really, Gordon. That's about it. There's people wanting to change the words of what we were saying from previous weeks. I'm not going to bother with that. People don't like our tone. I don't care. People don't like the angle we're going at, so I don't care about that either. This is about factual information. Take what you will from it. If you don't like it, you don't need to tune in. You don't need to send your stuff thinking and threatening that we're not going to watch you anymore. Don't care.
There will always be naysayers. I mean, it's inevitable. As soon as you do this kind of thing online, that's what you're exposed to, and you just have to accept it. I've had it for 15 years now, and it's water off a duck's back.
Exactly, Gordon, exactly. Can we get into the first story? I'm going to get your opinion on this because it's just come through from the figures for Scottish homeowners. Thousands of Scottish homeowners are one pay packet away from a crisis, Gordon. Big headline. This is from Shelter Scotland, and others are reporting on this one today. Figures from this report show that almost a third of us in Scotland, homeowners with a mortgage, have no savings or investment, and therefore, according to the housing charities, run the risk of being unable to meet mortgage payments and eventually becoming homeless. This is in 2025, Gordon. This is why we have to have independence, because our people are losing their houses. How much serious does it get when people are up against not paying their mortgage and being forced into a repossession?
Well, the other thing is, when repossessions happen, those people then have to fall back on the social safety nets provided by the local authority, and that often means being put into bed and breakfast accommodation at the expense of taxpayers like you and I, who are having to foot the bill for these losses. But I always think that there are several pointers that you know when you're living in a country which is in a recession. in a deep recession. Those things are more car washes, more dog walker businesses, and home repossessions. And the home repossessions are basically the banks foreclosing on loans that people cannot keep the payments up for. So we have to look at not just what this problem is, but what's caused it.
Mhm.
And I think that what's causing it is the recession in the UK. Nobody in the British mainstream media will say that we're in a recession, but the economy is contracting dramatically as we speak. There's no growth in the British economy whatsoever. Jobs are being lost all the time. Scottish big businesses are moving south, and you can tell that we're in a recession because they're bailing out. And so a lot of people are losing their homes because they're losing their jobs, or their pay is being cut, or they're having to accept low wages. And that is a universal truth across the entire UK at the moment. Probably about 50% of everybody living in the UK, including us in Scotland, are living with spending at least half of our income just to repay a mortgage, which is probably going to last 25 or 30 years now. And so we're going to be in debt to the banks for most of our working lives. I'm lucky that I finally paid my mortgage off because I'm an oldster now, but that's 5 years of my earnings, up to Swinny. However, I do at least own the house now, so that is an asset. But I'm one of the luckier ones who've escaped it now.
Yeah, you are. But the problem is, Gordon, that too few homeowners realise just how fragile their finances are until they hit there's an unexpected crisis. I mean, it could be your car. For goodness sake, if you're using your car to get from to work and it suddenly needs a £500 bill to get it fixed, you haven't got that money.
No.
You haven't, and you suddenly realise, and you're hoping and praying that you can get away with it, but you can't because it needs fixed and it costs £500, and that puts you on the spiral down, the vortex down, and you're scrambling for Peter to pay Paul. It is a hellish, awful way to live a life.
No, it's true, Nori. And in the past, when people have gone into arrears on their mortgage payments, they've often been able to negotiate a payment holiday with the banker or with the lender to tide them over until they get a new job. Now, I know that you and I have discussed this topic before, and the idea came up, and I know you mentioned it just recently, in fact, that the Scottish Government could set up some kind of a scheme to guarantee people's mortgage payments should they have the misfortune to, say, lose a job or their circumstances change dramatically through illness. What do you think? Is that a possibility?
The thing about a bank giving you a holiday, Gordon, on this piece here, it actually tells you have a holiday of 4 weeks to try and get your life back in order, but you don't get 4 or 5 weeks or months, 5 months free. That has to be paid back as well. So the banks don't help you in any way. In fact, the best solution for a bank, if you think about it logically, is to get you out and get somebody in that's got money that can pay them back. And that's what homelessness is all about. And that's what repossessions are all about. Gordon, I didn't even know this, honestly. There's a company called We Buy Any Car. There's now a company called We Buy Any House.
I've seen it.
Unbelievable. So you go there and you sell the house to them and then what you do?
Well, the thing is, Nori, that these We Buy Any House, We Buy Any Car companies will give you the lowest possible payment. It will be well below market value for what you own, because they know you're desperate for any kind of money to get out of the hole you're in. So it's disaster capitalism at its worst. It's something, again, which is a sign of a collapsing British economy and a deep recession, which nobody wants to talk about. We're being so gaslit about this. It's unbelievable. But, I mean, is there a solution? Could the Scottish Government have a fund made available to tide people over so that they can maybe find new employment or find another source of income, or even just find themselves some affordable rented accommodation so they're not living in a hotel or a guest house?
Well, one of the things is if we had a central bank, Gordon, and we had we could issue notes and have a currency, then this would all come after independence. And it gave a lower rate of mortgage, and it was a balanced one. If the inflation went up, then the mortgage would go down to accommodate it, etc., etc. It would be a set of parameters to make sure that the people were saved from this recession, were blanketed from it. If you had that on the go, and you gave people the option, this would go back to currency as well, and you gave people the chance to say, oh, I want to put my mortgage into the bank, the Scottish bank, the new bank, the whatever we call it. You'd have everybody with their mortgage going in there, and it would bolster that bank beyond belief, because everybody would be putting their mortgage in there because you pay less. You know, shifting mortgages all over the. So you could have that, but it would have to be. You'd have to work with the communities and the people rather than say on high, we're doing the best we can. No, you're not. The SNP, if I can give you a quote, Gordon, said the Scottish Government spokesman said the rent to mortgage scheme was unparalleled in England. So they're comparing Scotland with England again. This boils my blood. If you're going to compare Scotland with 5 million people to England with 60 odd million people, who are you trying to kid? Ours is better than theirs. I don't give a damn. Why don't you compare Scotland with Norway or Denmark? Similar sized countries. Get the data from them. Get it from them and put it in that parliament and show to the people this is what a country of our size should and could be. Never mind comparing us with England or Wales. They are incomparable, Gordon.
Nori, do you think that there's any mileage in the idea of going back to what we used to do, which was to build council houses and rent them at affordable rents? Because ever since Margaret Thatcher's time, when she announced that people could buy their council homes have disappeared. So there's very little social housing left to accommodate anyone who's unlucky enough to have their house repossessed. So I think the answer here is to provide more affordable accommodation that people can afford, rather than turfing them out of homes that they plainly can't afford, having been lent money that the bank must have known they could ill afford in the first place. That was what caused the banking crash in 2008, was banks lending recklessly to people they knew wouldn't be able to repay it. Because of a government scheme which was introduced back then, which failed. Now, it's obvious to me that the mortgage system cannot work properly. It has to make profit, and therefore it's not the answer. The answer is to provide houses which people can afford to live in, and let's say they live in it at a rental they can afford for 25 years. After 25 years, that local authority can say, well, you can now pass this rental on to any one of your offspring that you wish, and they can rent it. So families have continuity of accommodation when they need it, and it can be passed on to the next generation. It'll still be a rental. They'll still pay rent on it. They're not going to own it, but they'll always have a home. And really, that's the key. As long as people always have a home that they can go back to, they'll feel safe and they'll be safe, and they'll be safe all of their lives. It's just providing that surety for people so they know that it's going to always be there.
Well, we have to move out of this neoliberal model, Gordon. We have to get rid of this. We have to go into a community-based model, a socialist model, if you like, and say, right, what do we need? We need cheap, affordable, good housing. We need a Scottish housing association so that they can build the houses we need. And we don't get these Lego houses all over the place, which are vandalising, to be honest, our countryside. They're making a mess of the Highlands should be looking like. Even this week, Gordon, tourists have been coming up and walking about Drumnadrochit and thinking, oh, what's happening? They wanted because they want in their head, I guess, Americans especially want this Brigadoon place. We can't give them that. Scotland's moving in the 21st century, right? But at the same time, we don't need these Lego bricks built houses, which are built in floodplains They're taking away an ecosystem, an eco-culture. They're horrible to look at. They're really poorly built, and nobody likes them. Nobody likes them. But this is a free market we're in, Gordon. This is a neoliberal market we're in. And these things are going to happen continually until we change the model of government.
One of the problems, Rory, one of the problems I see is partially connected with the tourism issue is that a lot of these very beautiful rural settings, these villages which have wonderful sea views or mountain views, are incredibly popular with people with money who want to buy a house in an area like that with a beautiful view. And so the prices in that wee village, which had probably for decades never really budged, suddenly skyrocket and it becomes a desirable postcode. And I actually could tell you just from experience that I was in a village in the Western Highlands just the other day, and there was a house for sale there, and I couldn't see it from the road. It was behind other older houses. And when I walked up the path, it turned out to be a school hut. One of those that they built in the 60s and 70s in school playgrounds. It had been converted into a sort of open plan bungalow. Do you know how much they were asking for that hut? £316,000, just because of the village it was in. I think that incredible.
Do you know this, Gordon? I remember writing a story for an online organisation, and we were wanting to know the state of housing in Scotland. And I went to Mallock, in the west coast of Scotland, a fishing village. It used to be. Now it depends on tourism. There's hardly anything there. The boats are all gone, which is a bad and a good thing in a way, but that's another story. And I saw the council houses at the back of Mallock, and they're hidden away right at the very back, and they're bleak and they're dark, and the mountain water runs down the back of them, and they're all mildew and they're all damp and all the rest of it. And you come out of there and you look down to Arisaig. You just come out the road and you're at Arisaig, just about 2 or 3 miles away, and you've got all these beautiful houses looking across to the beautiful sunlit islands of Muck, Egg and Rum. These are great things for the mental health. They stimulate people, they relax people, they make this life worth living. Why put people who can't afford it, Gordon, on basically on money, and put them on the corners, the peripheries, where they're going to be in absolute poverty and dejection? We can't do that to our people, but that's what we have been doing. And those that have got money get what they want, and those who don't, through no fault of their own, have got to live. No, they don't even live. They exist. They just exist. And you know, for the Highlands for a long time, and it still happens to this day, there's so many male suicides in the Highlands. It is incredible. Why do you think that might be, Gordon? We have to stop this.
Hopelessness and desperation.
And what's this life about? I'm not happy. We all want to be happy, don't we? That's it. If we're in a happy state, we're in a comfortable place. We're really we want to do things, we want to seek, and want to explore. When we're in that wee place, we don't want to come out because it's too cold out there. And it knocks back our inhibitions.
Well, that sort of brings us to one of the other topics. I know we're going to touch on this later on, the topic of tourism, which we spoke about a few times. And I know that you were saying to me recently that Kate Forbes has made some statements about her plans to boost tourism. What is she actually proposing to do, Norrie?
Nothing, Gordon. Listen. I honestly think that is going to be a massive subject, and we'll want people to give us their views, good or bad, about what we're discussing on it. I could sit here for the next 2 hours, Gordon, telling you about it. But the other big story, I guess, today is John Swinny sets out a 3-point plan for fresh independence push. I don't know if you've seen this, Gordon. It's just out in the National today. I'll tell you what. I'll read it out. I'll get your opinion. How's that?
Let's find out what the 3 points are, Norrie. Let me think about it.
Right, I'll scroll down. I'm getting rid of all this guff here.
All right.
There's so much. Why right here it is. He says, "Why am I launching a renewed strategy for independence? Right. To get back on track, he's telling us things that we know already, Gordon, such as the people of Scotland are listening to the SNP again because the Scottish Government I lead is focused on the issues that matter to them.
Right.
We are offering solutions on the ongoing cost of living crisis with new policies such as the removal of peak fares on our railways.
Well,
Gordon, we've just been speaking about people losing their homes. If you haven't got a home, you can't then keep doing a job. You can't use the railways then, John. You know, get with the big issues, please. Okay. So he knows there's a cost of living crisis. He's telling us what they have to do. We're in the race once again, the SNP, leading in the polls ahead of the Holyrood election next year. But my winning post is not one election, it is independence, and that is what I aim in this job to achieve. So there's all that kind of guff before it. But I'll try and get the actual, this, here it goes, the 3-point plan. So there's a lot of guff in between the lines. Right, he said, I'll get down here. Thirdly, secondly, firstly, so, right, I'll get them 1, 2, 3. Swinny said he will tell independent supporters that they were correct in their assessment that Westminster was fundamentally broken. And now it's time to do something about it. Listen, I'm quoting here. But I also will be urging people who were not persuaded of the merits of independence in 2014 to see the state of Britain today and take a different view, Swinny added. The election campaign will focus on the benefits of independence so that we can ensure our vast energy wealth delivers tangible benefits for our people, including lower household energy bills and a more competitive business environment. But how do we get there? How do we get there, John? Well, he's wanting an emphatic win for the SNP because a strong SNP is the only way to secure independence. So it's all this stuff, Gordon. There's hardly any meat on the bones here.
No, there isn't any meat. There's only bones. Even the bones are arthritic.
I know, and people are going to get on to us for hammering the SNP. But when you're getting this,
was there a third point in this plan, Norrie?
Well, these are the points, Gordon. He says, thirdly, an emphatic win for the SNP is at the Holyrood 2026 election is the way to secure independence. History tells us that only when the SNP is doing well is there any prospect of advancing on Scotland's constitutional cause, Swinny said. Gordon, you know what comes straight to mind here? In 2015, we had 56 MPs.
Yep.
SNP were doing well. And what happened? So, John,
did nothing with it.
Because I'm going to blow a gasket here. You better take over.
Was that the sum total of his entire plan?
That's it, more or less. He wants to build the highest supports possible. Build the highest levels of support possible for independence as the best future for Scotland. But I will also be urging people who were not persuaded of the merits of independence in 2014 to see the state of Britain today and take a different view. So there's not very much going on here.
It's not a plan. There's no action in that. There is a campaign to try and persuade people to vote for the SNP so that hopefully at some point in the very distant future there might be a chance of some sort of way of getting independence that he doesn't specify. So there's absolutely nothing there. It's the emperor's new clothes, they don't exist. That's just waffle. It's political word salad. Doesn't mean anything, it's just a vote for us because we're your best hope. In fact, I'd rephrase that as we'll vote for us because we're the only hope. Nobody else, no parties have got a hope of doing it. And that is the way the SNP wants this to sound. Now, I asked a question last week on my own programme, and in fact put this out on X. Why is it that the SNP government is so scared to even
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
liberation or finding a way forward to get it? And various people answered that question, but Sarah Salios came back to me with an interesting observation, which was that the reason she thinks that they will not do it is because that if we declared UDI, if we unilaterally declared independence after a big win in 2026, the international community would not recognise our independence because the international community, from the UN downwards, still believes that Scotland is part of a voluntary unitary state, which it is an equal partner in, because that's the narrative which has been given to the international community, which is still accepted. Until the UN rules that that's not the case, and that Scotland is in fact a non-self-governing territory, i.e. a colony, and is therefore eligible for decolonisation, she doesn't believe that the dial can be moved to the point where we get international acceptance for a declaration of independence. Now, that was an interesting one because it meant that what Sarah's saying is that the politicians believe that it doesn't matter how they try to achieve independence, the rest of the world wouldn't accept it, and therefore they won't do it. That is one explanation, but I think there's also the fear factor.
Yeah. I think.
The fear factor, as I call it, which is you do this and the same thing could happen to you as happened to Willie McRae. You might have a fatal accident of some sort, or you might commit suicide unexpectedly. Now, this is definitely an implied threat. It's never been made explicit, but it's always hovering in the background. That what happened to Willie McRae could happen again to somebody else. And I think the combination of those things is what's holding it back. The SNP will not commit to a mechanism for independence until there's international recognition of Scotland's real state as a de facto colony, as a non-self-governing territory of England. Because Britain, as we know, is England, with Scotland added to its crown, illegally in this case. But until something happens with the international community, the SNP won't act. And so next year's general election is largely a piece of political theatre. And we could get a very big majority for independence with multiple parties, and it still won't make any difference. It will just strengthen the belief in independence, which is a good thing. But we have to be realistic here. Until things move at the UN, we probably will not see any motion forwards.
I take a different view on this, Gordon. If I can come back to what Sarah Saliers is saying, I disagree with that. Scotland, for its part in this world, has been seen as a friendly country. Our people go abroad. People know about Scotland. You only have to look at the Euros a couple of years ago when we went to Germany. We lost all our games and they were expecting a lot of trouble, but Scotland just celebrated because we're on holiday. And what happens when Scotland is away? It feels free to champion its own cause away from the constraints of the media and all the rest of it in their own country. It's always been said, Gordon, when you take a Scotsman to Canada, he'll go mad because there's no feudal element there. When you take him on a trip to all over the world, if we went for UDI, I am absolutely convinced the way that UK is right now in world circles, people would come down favourably and say, do you know what? It must take a hell of a lot for those Scots to be take UDI. It must be a last chance saloon. They're always the most sincere and honest people. They wouldn't come down and go, oh, that's terrible. That's shocking. I don't think it would happen like that at all.
It's not the people themselves that are the problem, Nori. This is the thing. We have to separate our own emotional feelings and connections with other people in other countries who do want Scotland to be independent. Let's not, argue about that. They don't understand why we aren't. But at the same time, the political and legal consequences of making a unilateral declaration would need to be recognised at the UN. And there are, some precedents here, like Kosovo, for example, is still not recognised and not allowed to join the UN or the EU because it made a declaration of independence, became independent, but other countries will not allow them to join the international community because it was done in a way which wasn't approved by international law.
But
And
Gordon, there's a big difference between Kosovo and Scotland.
there's two sides to it, Norrie. We need to do them both. We need to get people on our side, as you say, but we also need to tick the legal boxes before we do it.
Gordon, I can assure you there are more people in Scotland wanting independence, Scottish people wanting independence than there isn't. I think there's a majority, a big majority there.
That's
if you're talking about Kosovo, guns and bombs and people shot dead. Scotland, nobody shot dead. It's a different thing altogether. A peace-loving nation. And what I'm trying to say is, when we go to Germany, we show that we're here to party. We're not here to smash windows and take on the police. We're here to party. That's who we are. That's who we want to be. And if we get one other country, Ireland, Iceland, to come down with us and say, look, Scotland are, we support these, we'll ratify them. And that's all it takes. How do you think Estonia and Lithuania? It wasn't parties, it was people, demonstrations. And it's always going to be the people who get your independence. It's not going to be parties. Alf Baird explains this in his book.
Certainly. Yeah, and no, I agree with this, Norrie. The problem is an international one. It's not a problem of support. We've got the support. It's been demonstrated in poll after poll, and these are polls produced by the British media, so they're vastly underrepresenting the truth here. So we know it's there, support there. We know we're well regarded, and everybody in Europe loves us. That's what we need, but we all have to do the legal things right. Otherwise, a peaceful transition to independence won't be achieved, because if we try to do it without that, without the UN recognition of our status as it is now, then we will be in limbo for years after independence, and it might be incredibly difficult for us not to join the EU, for example, but to be able to trade freely with other countries when we're still seen as some kind of halfway house between full independence and international acceptance. And that's a fate I wouldn't like to see for Scotland. I'd like to see us seamlessly join the European Free Trade Association immediately, trading and to pick up economic pace again, so that we can invest in all the things we speak about. I'm just worried that if we keep focusing entirely on the emotional and the people side of it, we miss this very practical step that has to be taken as well. And this is why Salvo is important, I believe, because they're doing that homework and it's in train at the moment. Craig Murray is part of that, as you know. And actually, that's probably a nice way of introducing Craig Murray into the next part of the programme.
Well, I'm always saying, Gordon, is that don't knock soft power, people power. It carries a lot of weight. In fact, it carries more than political weight, because most people can understand the word of an ordinary person than they can of a politician.
Yep, I agree. So, speaking about Craig
Murray, right. Craig Murray said somewhere, I think it was on Twitter or X or somewhere, that Jeremy Corbyn's new party would be the party for Scots to join up for, because the SNP have lost their left of centre leanings. So the left of centre should all go towards Jeremy Corbyn, because he's known him for a long time, and he would now would back independence. A lot of people are saying, wait a minute here, you're all right in the UN stuff, but on this you're sadly missing the mark. Jeremy Corbyn was up here before. He wore a tartan scarf to make sure he was on side with the locals when he visited, when he was the leader of the Labour Party. And he categorically said, there'll be no independence referendum. You've had your chips, not a chance in hell. What has changed, Gordon, that Craig Murray is wanting us to vote for this party, who are, as far as I can see, not quite behind self-determination for Scotland in their policies?
From what I've managed to read so far, and I'm not fully up to date on what Craig Murray's been saying, but I know from what I've seen from Jeremy Corbyn that his new party, or the spokesperson for his new party, has said that this new party, as far as Scotland is concerned, does self-determination for Scotland. Now, That was made quite explicit. But there was no follow-up to say that they would support another independence referendum or would make sure that one happened. So that's missing. The other thing is we don't really know yet whether Mr. Corbyn's new party will be standing candidates in Holyrood, because it's a British party. It's an alternative party to Starmer's party, which is no longer Labour. Corbyn does have a massive amount of support from the left in the Labour Party, and like the SNP, when it fractured and Alba began, I think the Labour Party is going the same way. It's beginning to fracture now. Starmer's going to be left on his own while Corbyn goes off and forms this new party of the left. But its main concern is not us. We're a sideshow, really, as far as Mr. Corbyn's concerned, I believe. And until he says something specific to the Scots, I don't believe that we should get behind him. Not for the reasons that Craig Murray has said. I know Craig Murray, and he knows a lot of senior politicians, and he probably is a good friend of Mr. Corbyn's, because Craig Murray is a socialist. That's always been the case. That's where he started his political career, if you like. Never changed that. And, he's to be applauded for sticking to his guns when it comes to his principles. But his support for Mr. Corbyn, I believe, is based on the personal relationship and the trust that Craig has in Jeremy Corbyn. It remains to be seen whether Corbyn continues with the Labour policy of telling any kind of lie that they think will get them elected, and then doing the total opposite when they get into power. Because
the thing that worries me, Gordon, that worries me is Corbyn's been a member of that parliament for donkey's years. He's steeped in the traditions of it. He can't see outside his own bubble, except for taking on the emotional subjects like Gaza, and quite rightly so, but they are emotional and they're easy to generate a lot of heat from. When it comes to the nitty-gritty, would you trust this man? Knowing full well that if he looks at Hansard and looks at all the records and sees, or looks at the books and says, Scotland is a cash cow, we can't afford to live without it, and he's wanting to be the Prime Minister in a new party, do you think he's honestly going to say, bye-bye Scotland and all the cash that goes with it? No, he's not that daft.
Well, that's the question. I mean, if Mr. Corbyn's new party does actually support self-determination for Scotland, that means that he would have to accept that we have the right to vote on staying in the Union or not, because that's the implication of that support. But do you trust a Labour politician of any stripe, to fulfil the promises they make before a general election? I don't. I have some respect for Mr. Corbyn, but I think he's carrying an awful lot of Labour baggage with him in terms of his attitude and the way that the Labour Party does its business, which is basically to lie to get into office and then struggle to govern afterwards, because everything that they wanted to do or said they wanted to do can't be done, and so they fritter. They don't fritter away, but they fiddle around the edges as much as the MP does.
But maybe the times are changing, Gordon. Maybe the likes of George Galloway has come now out and said, "Oh, independence. I was totally against it, but now I can see why Scotland would want it. I don't support it, but I can see now why the people should have that choice." So maybe things are moving in a direction that a lot of people are thinking, you know what, Scotland is really in a bad way. They should have the chance to do something different.
I suspect that George Galloway's sudden conversion to the idea of Scottish self-determination is more linked to his ability to get elected somewhere in Scotland.
Yeah,
I would
probably.
Galloway as far as I could kick him. He changes his mind, depending on the way the wind's blowing. He's a typical opportunist politician. He'll jump on anything that he thinks will get him elected. And this is a problem with all politicians. Unless they're people of principle, they're not going to do what they say. That was the whole reason why Alex Salmond was successful. He was working in tight constraints, but he did the maximum amount that he could get away with within the system. But even he was constrained by it, and he knew that. And that, I think, ultimately was why the independence campaign in 2014 failed, because it was set up to fail by the British state, who actually managed the entire event to their own advantage. And I know that Mr. Salmond knew that would be the case, and it was always a very long shot. But as you know, Mr. Salmond was a keen gambler, and he would weigh the odds before he did something. And he must have thought there's a chance that we could make this happen. So he took the opportunity. And it only just, I mean, to be fair to Mr. Salmond, it nearly got there. But it was eventually nixed by the British, who changed the goalposts, who just simply disobeyed their own rules of purdah and made a promise to the people of Scotland that they had no intention of keeping. And we all know the history of that. So, as you say, let's not trust politicians, let's trust ourselves. And see if we can win the approval of the UN for decolonization, because it would certainly help. Because then we could make a unilateral declaration of independence based on even a very successful general election result for independence parties.
Do you think that Craig Murray is making good diplomatic moves here, though? Because he might be able to foretell that Jeremy Corbyn might be in an advantageous position. The polls are suggesting he might win 25% of the vote in an election. Stammer's on the way down. His trust from the people has gone. So in the event that we go to the UN, it might be that the easy thing for Jeremy Corbyn to do was to side up with the Scots, because the diplomacy from Craig Murray has been such that he's kind of cornered him into a straitjacket, if you like. Do you think there's diplomatic moves on the way here?
One of the things to remember about Craig Murray is that despite appearances, he's a very smart man, and he could be trying to manoeuvre Corbyn into a position. In other words, by manoeuvring Corbyn into position as a threat to the SNP here in Scotland, he actually puts pressure on the SNP to force the issue of independence more. Otherwise, they're more likely to lose to Mr. Corbyn's party in Scotland. So, you know, there are all sorts of reasons and motivations why Craig Murray would say something like this. I don't think it's going to lead to anything, though. I think it's more to put pressure on the SNP. You know, there's a threat from the left that they need to address. So a lot of shenanigans and manoeuvring is going on. What other topics do you have for today?
There's that. Last week, Gordon, I wore an Aberdeen top, and a couple of people were saying, great top, Norrie, but don't get confused by an Aberdeen top being a British Lions top, for heaven's sake. I couldn't care less about this corporate rugby rubbish. I'll be supporting Scotland, who are playing right now against Samoa, by the way, and I hope they're doing well. And it's on pay-per-view. And so is the British Lions. Gordon, it's something that I just cannot get into. I don't understand what this 4 nations against another 1 nation is all about. It just seems corporate greed through rugby again. And I don't want to, it doesn't bother me. I don't care if there are 5 Scots in the squad. Whoopie-doo. I'm not British. I don't feel like a lion. I'm not Irish. It's not for me. No thanks. I'll watch Scotland. That'll do me.
I would agree with that. I mean, who you choose to follow in sports is up to you. And if you don't believe all this British nonsense, then don't watch it. And rugby union and rugby league have different roots and different people backing them. You know, rugby union was the grassroots amateur game at one time, and rugby league was a professional game. And as for the British Lions, are they not rugby league players mostly?
Right? No, they're rugby union. It's all rugby union.
It is union. Okay, so this is their attempt to stamp a union flag on a rugby team.
Correct, and it's very political, Gordon.
Of
And
course.
the people they get to interview are Sir Ian McGeechan, Sir Bill Bowman. You get knighted and rewarded for being a British and Irish lion.
Of course you do.
I'm amazed that the Irish are taking part in this. It must be that, the mullah. It can be nothing else.
No, people are impressed by knighthoods, Nori, and they think, oh, that would be great. If I just wave the Union flag and support Britain in everything that I do, I could become a knight or a dame, and that's
Aye,
brilliant. It doesn't,
Jackie Bailey,
it doesn't
Margaret
give them any.
Curran. You know,
Yeah, it's brownie points basically. They think people will respect them more.
yeah,
Um, I don't. I mean, a lot of people have refused knighthoods in the past,
mhm.
uh, and I'm pretty sure that Jeremy Corbyn and Craig Murray would both refuse them on principle. So,
No, I would. I would want one. The guy that there's a few notable exceptions to the OB or MB, and it's the fact that it had empire in it. That's empire, Gordon. That would put me off. That would. I don't want to be reminded of my country's history of killing black slaves and taking over lands. Nah, I don't want that. I don't believe in empire. So I couldn't take your OB, MB, anything that's got
but
empire in it.
if you're British, you live in the past, and you
Yeah.
wave the flag and you celebrate past glories that have long since gone in a country which is basically sliding down the toilet of obscurity in terms of its economic performance, losing jobs at a furious rate. And the only thing the British government can do to stem that is increase weapons production, because it's one of the only things that England actually exports anywhere, and it's all about the money.
Oh,
Yeah. So that seems to be where we're at. The only big sort of growth markets in the UK are in weapons manufacturing.
and that paper trail of money, Gordon, goes.
By the way, we are
Yeah,
very.
that paper trail of money goes all the way to Westminster. Do you know Theresa
Yeah.
May's husband? I can't remember his name, but he's part of Lockheed Technologies, CEO, making millions on
Yep.
arms to kill people. So that sniper that shot a baby through the head, that bullet, where do you think these things come from? Where do you think
Yep.
these explosives come from for blowing up? Where do you think these drones that carry weapons come from? You know,
Indeed. Do you
it
know?
comes from your own backyard.
Talking about things that you could do rather than things that the British government is doing. I was watching an interesting documentary about a German firm, a chemical company, which has created a replacement for steel reinforcement in concrete
Mhm.
from algae, which they grow in huge vats, right? And this stuff sucks carbon dioxide out of the air as these things grow, right? Once they've grown millions of gallons of this stuff or liters of this stuff, they then sort of distill it down because it forms a kind of natural oil. And they can actually turn that oil, believe it or not, into carbon fiber without
Wow.
any without any heat
Wow.
at all. And so it sucks the carbon out of there, turns it into carbon fiber, which they can then weave into a solid mesh that looks like weld mesh, like steel. And they discovered if they put this in concrete, they could use 50% less concrete, and yet the structure will be stronger than a steel reinforced concrete panel. And they're now saying that this is the world's first carbon, not neutral, but carbon negative building material that actually
Yeah, of
takes
course.
of the air to make this stuff. And that's exactly the kind of thing I was talking about happening where Grangemouth is at the moment. That's what we should be building, not, you know, not drilling for more oil, but actually finding ways to replace the oil with something better and produce a material that actually sucks carbon out of the air. That's never been done before. Trust, trust the Germans to come up with that.
Well, here's the thing, Gordon. I've got a good friend at Aberdeen University, Dr. Donald McPhee, and he works in concrete as well. And he went to Saudi Arabia, I think it was, and he was looking at, because they've got a lot of sand, but it's
Of course,
useless sand. It's not grainy sand. It's very fine.
yeah,
It's not good for building. So they have to import it. And they were wondering what could we do to utilize our sand. And Aberdeen University came up with this idea to add. I cannot describe the technological and scientific processes, but
yeah,
they've made this sand now compatible for building Before it wasn't, but now it is. Scottish University looking at the structures under the microscopes, trying and testing all the stuff, and all of a sudden they've recognised that there's something missing from the sand. They've added it in, and now the Saudi Arabia government are saying thank you very much. They've bought the license off the university and they're doing it themselves. Here's the thing, Gordon. Couldn't we, as a country, set up this business through a Scottish business grant or whatever, look at it and say, this is a really good technology. This is a world first. Fund it so that it doesn't get bought over and taken away. And then you go to Saudi Arabia and you take money backwards and forwards because you've got the patent. The patent hasn't been bought off you.
Yeah.
This is how business works. And if we put more and more cash into our universities and said, look, we are a country of thinkers and inventors. Let's do something bold and big and get Scotland on the map again. Because let's face it, Gordon, we've been lying dormant for a long, long time. Not much has happened in Scotland. And we're being denuded every single day with Grangemouth for a start. What else? What next before we're a desert?
Yeah. I mean, the closure of Grangemouth, I think, was eventually inevitable. I mean, it's been saved from closure twice by Alex Salmond's administration in the past. And I think that tells you that the company that owned it was always planning to get rid of it. So Ineos is away, you know. But what do you replace that plant with? You have to replace it with something better that's more future-proof. And a carbon fibre manufacturing plant like this system the Germans are proposing would be fantastic. It would utilise the chemical engineering expertise that the Scots scientists have got to build a new plant that makes a building reinforcement material that can't rust. That means any concrete structure will last forever, you know, and that's something we just cannot do at the moment. And that's exactly where the investment should be going.
And Gordon, you mentioned was it a couple of weeks ago. You were mentioning this this installation in the North Sea, which was there for 6 years, and it hadn't been tampered. It hadn't been damaged.
That was
we should be
Tidal.
looking at that and saying, "Wow, what can we do to build more of these and sell them off and become a world leader?" But what we don't do anything. We just let it go. The markets decide, and we're left with thinking that could have been.
The interesting thing about having tidal energy is if you have too much of it, which we would do, let's say you produce 10 times more energy than you actually need, then that spare energy can be used instead of burning gas or fossil fuels to create concrete, which isn't producing carbon dioxide through this massive amount of burning that they have to do. To produce concrete, you have to superheat chalk until it breaks down and becomes cement. That takes a tremendous amount of energy. So it's something like 1100 degrees Celsius. You can do that in an electric arc furnace without gas if you have the spare capacity. And that's where the tidal energy could come in. You could have a whole industry which doesn't use any burning materials at all, no fuel, except that raw energy coming from the tides. And you'd have a completely circular economy which sucks carbon out of the environment and produces useful stuff that we can use to build things.
I know. It's a win-win. You know?
Nobody is, right? And new businesses will be generated in Scotland could flourish, but nobody looks at the bigger picture. And that's Scotland's biggest problem. We are living in what I would call a fallow country that's been allowed to sit largely idle and useless and under-resourced, where repair work and maintenance work isn't done. So our infrastructure is garbage, it's crumbling road systems, it's expensive travel, just even within the country. And we're stuck with that. Until we escape the union, we can't do any of these wonderful new things, but we're well capable of it. And
of course we are, Gordon. Of course
and we elected politicians with the gumption to plan ahead. We could.
Bang on. Listen, there's one story that we've missed, but if we can catch up with it, it's this one about Sandy Peggy, who was taken to court by, well, not court, but she was taken to a tribunal, an employment tribunal, She was head of nursing at NHS Fife. You may recall this one.
Yes.
She raised concerns about sharing facilities with Dr. Beth Upton, a trans woman, in a different way. She called her out. You shouldn't be here in the changing rooms, and that was deemed to be from the Dr. Beth. Why was a doctor in a nurse's facility anyway? Do nurses and doctors have different? I don't know. But he said it was there was some kind of intimidation that they found from Sandy Peggy to this person. Now, Gordon, we'll get back to this law. It's a law in Scotland, to respect this and give people space and all the rest of it. But the facts remain facts. A man is a man and a woman is a woman, right? In biological terms. This is how we see it. Most people see it in these terms. That's a woman, I can tell by the bumps and lumps. That's a man because I can tell by the lumps and bumps, Adam's apple, etc., right? We're two different things and we come together to procreate, right? Unless you're of same-sex, homosexual or lesbian tendencies.
Yep.
If we look at it in terms of psychological background rather than biological, we see then where the SNP have got themselves stuck because they're now thinking, well, that guy thinks he's a woman, and because the chromosomes in his head have been altered, he now wishes to be identified because of psychological condition, not biological. Then we get confusion. Then we get real confusion about what's biological, what's psychological.
Yep.
So in this is a classic case. The legislation is there because we look at this and we think he wants to identify as a woman because up here there's something different compared to the rest of us. 1%, 2%, we're talking about the population. But yet he's taking up women's spaces. So 50% of the population feel threatened by 1% of the population. This is where this became unstuck. And this is where Sandy Peggy's case couldn't be upheld. They couldn't condemn her for these actions. What's your take on it, Gordon? Are you like me? You think this is like, we should never have got here?
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, I mean, the way I look at this is simple, that women's changing rooms, toileting facilities have been long established to protect women from predatory men. Now, any woman in a changing room, which is a woman's only changing room, on seeing a man who plainly to them looks like a man dressed as a woman, undressing in front of them in a changing room, is going to make them feel scared and threatened. That's a fact that any woman would feel the same way, which is perfectly understandable. So therefore, it cannot be gross misconduct to react in a normal human way to that situation, no matter whether the trans woman feels aggrieved by that or feels disadvantaged by it or picked on. Unfortunately, it's a fact, as you say. But the solution to that is very simple. Because trans women are a very small minority of the Scottish population, I believe it's actually less than 1%, or I'd need to look at the figures. But I think it's 1%, a very tiny number. But there are probably several hundred or several thousand individuals in that group. They need to be catered for, and the simplest way to do that is to provide cubicle toilets which are not for men or women, but can be used by all, a bit like a disabled facility. And I think you and I mentioned this idea earlier on, that disabled toilets could easily have a sign on them saying for trans people, because it removes the threat from women's spaces, but it gives trans people the same rights to facilities and privacy themselves. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a solution, and it would adequately deal with the problem. As I say, it's not perfect. It doesn't provide a trans woman with exactly the same feeling that a biological woman would have from protected spaces, but it prevents these clashes from taking place. And both sets of people would feel safe in those surroundings, and they would both feel that their rights were being protected. So we need some pragmatic thinking from our politicians.
The thing is, we're talking about solutions, and we're looking at this case when we shouldn't have to, Gordon. This is a distraction. This is something that this is what the unionist cabal have kind of used to split the independence campaign. Why is it split the independence campaign? Because it's the SNP. John Swinny's already alluded to it, that a strong SNP means independence is back on the agenda. You know, this is what the good politics would say to you. Wait a minute, this is a danger here. This is a warning. We can't go here because this is going to be 1% attacking 50%. It's not worth it. In balance, voting terms, now we want 50% on our side rather than 1%. Now, I'm afraid in politics, that's how it works. The majority carry. And maybe in this instance, majorities should carry as well. Look, you want to identify as a woman. Here's the thing, that comes with conditions. You can say you're a woman, but you cannot enter spaces because you think you're a woman. The fact remains is you aren't, but you think you are, so you can identify as that. That's as far as it goes.
Just about balancing the rights of the majority against the minority. Everybody has to have the same rights, but the physical facilities need to be set up so that neither group feels disadvantaged and neither feels threatened. Nori, listen, we have completely run out of time, I'm afraid.
Whoa, so we have.
I need to get about my daily work.
Me too, Gordon. It's a big day for me, and the sun's shining, so I might just get out and about. I might catch a tail end of Scotland some more. Don't forget, if you like this, subscribe and get the bell rung. That lets you know that when another one's coming up next week, it just flashes up. It helps us as well. That's all, Gordon.
That's it. Become a channel member, press all the buttons, and watch the programme every week.
Like and share. All the best, Gordon.
All right, Danny. Have a great weekend. I'll see you next week. Thanks to all the viewers for watching, and we'll see you next Friday at 9:30. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye, Gordon.